Hi there, everybody. So thank you ever so much for joining us. I just wanted to do a really quick introduction to myself and tell you a little bit about Transition Partners and obviously introduce the lovely Caroline. So for those of you that don't know myself and Transition Partners, we are a recruitment company specialising in IT, digital and business change. We've been running neurodiversity events for around a year now. It's a real passion of mine, and I truly believe that neurodiversity is underrepresented in tech and business specifically. And I do love to get together with my network and spread awareness and understanding where I can. So just to kind of give you an idea on the format, if you do have any questions, just pop them in the Q&A box and we'll try and cover that at the end. But yeah, so without further ado, I'm super lucky today to be joined by Caroline Turner from Creased Puddle, and she's going to be giving us insights into a number of topics within this space. So welcome, Caroline. It's lovely to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks ever so much for that, Rose. Thanks for inviting me to be part of your Transition Partners event. I think we've got about half an hour, have we not, to discuss a little bit of neurodiversity, and I think the questions are going to be at the end. If anybody wants to pop those questions over, Rose is going to be my facilitator, and we'll have a little look at those at the end, which will be brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now, everybody. I've done a presentation that hopefully everybody will be able to see. Okay, so here we go. And let's just hope that that's going to work. Yay! Boom. Okay, so yeah, hi. So Caroline Turner is my name. Yeah, I was just about to finish that off with neurodiversity is my game. I haven't said that yet. But essentially, yes. Yeah, so I'm founder of Creased Puddle. Creased Puddle has been going for a good few years now, and we basically provide like a wraparound service for neurodiversity in organisations. So we do a lot of consultancy, HR support, line manager training, workplace assessments, interviewing, specialist interviewing. But in all honesty, we do as much again of kind of bespoke requests for organisations as well. So that's us. And if you want to know a little bit more about our services, then have a little look at our website, particularly our blog, which is now up to date. Finally, having had some time to dedicate to that. So get in touch later. So we've got half an hour, which is going to be a really, really quick flick through neurodiversity. And both Rose and I thought it would be really beneficial to kind of do a little bit of kind of back to basics of what is neurodiversity and to maybe answer some of those myths and legends and have a conversation about what it means to individuals and talking about the social model of disability. So without further ado, boom. We normally look at, we don't really have time to go into all of this, but when we do work in organisations, we look at these three different pillars. I would encourage you, if you are looking to put something together within your organisations, don't just waste, in my opinion, time and money on just making it about autism, for example. There's a lot of autism initiatives out there at the moment, and a lot of the work that you do in relation to those initiatives will directly relate to other neurological conditions like ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, blah, blah, blah. There's so much more interconnection between those different neurological conditions that it simply makes good business sense to look at neurodiversity as a whole, holistically, rather than it being siloed into one specific neurological condition. Taking that a little bit a step further, we said don't just do it for one element of your organisation, look at a timeline and look at it being parents and carers, your employees, and how you engage with your customers as well. So this three-pronged approach, we found that there really is a demand for this within organisations, and again, it's a real money-saving and efficient way to look at neurodiversity being embedded in your businesses. Boom. So this is me. Can you see that, Rose?
I can, yeah. I can see
yeah. Do you get to see the screens at the side or not?
We do, yeah.
Okay, so what I might do is just cancel that down. Okay, and then I'll just make that. Okay, so who am I? I've got to change that picture. But yeah, so I talk a lot. I talk a lot. I'm an advisory friend to the Institute of Equality and Diversity Professionals on neurodiversity, have been for a good couple of years now. And I'm owner of Creased Puddle, director, and I have a neurodiverse family. But then again, we all have a neurodiverse family. Neurodiversity being brains and different. And when I often do speaking pieces, I'll say, you know, who's normal? Hands up, who's normal then? And we all have a bit of a giggle because there might be the odd brave person that says, oh, I am, I'm normal. Because we all see and think and experience the world differently. So my son is autistic, my daughter is dyslexic, I'm ADHD, and my husband isn't diagnosed with anything, but I'm working on dyspraxia so that I don't leave him out of our colourful family. I'm a former police officer, so I did 21 years with North Yorkshire Police, and I suppose that this is where I cut my teeth in relation to looking at it was in the first instance, it was about autism, and it was about how we engage with our autistic communities. And you can imagine that actually, after not too much of a research project, the answer to that was we could do a lot better. And it was with that I started something called All Things Autism, and then with the support of the Chief Officer team, I was able to grow that into neurodiversity because I'd realised that actually a lot of the work that we were going to start doing around neurodiversity just directly related to the work that we should be doing for the neurological conditions, particularly when you look at the number of individuals who are undiagnosed and diagnosed as ADHD in the criminal justice system. So I started the first neurodiversity support network within policing, within British policing, and then retired and left it in somebody else's capable hands. Thanks very much. I had sort of a few months off deciding how this was going to translate into the real world, and then it was quite apparent that there was a large demand for the services that we were thinking of being able to put together for organisations. Hence, Creased Puddle was born. I do lots of speaking. I do lots of training. I'm a workplace assessor. And I also do a lot of work with employment lawyers and keeping up to date on what the case law, and being able to sit in the back of employment tribunals when I can to make sure that I'm where I should be in terms of my knowledge of what's currently out there for organisations and what they need to know. And then I do everything else in between that too. Okay, so first of all, I think it's a good idea to actually talk about what is the social model of disability, and I'm going to use autism as a way of describing how things are changing and where we started off and where hopefully we're going to be, because that hopefully can kind of get people on the same trajectory to actually, you know what, this is a thing. Because they're still having those conversations where people will say, are you sure, you know, is this something I really need to be bothered about? And actually, specifically from an organisational perspective, you bet your bottom dollar it is. So hopefully this will give you some reasons, and by all means take photographs. I think it's being recorded. You're more than happy to have any of this that you can use in order to build up your business case to do something within your organisations. So I'm going to use autism in order to describe what this trajectory looks like, and we're going to go back some 75 years. So we're going to meet these two individuals here. This is Hans Asperger and Leo Kanner. When we're doing some training, we use this slide. We'll often say, does anybody recognise any of the names on there? And quite often you'll always get somebody say, oh, Leo the lion. But actually the one that people notice more and more is Asperger, because of Asperger's syndrome. And more often than not, this is not diagnosed anymore. Since the DSM-5 came out, generally you will see that people are diagnosed as being autistic. However, we're seeing in the psychologist reports that people will use Asperger's still as almost like a benchmark, and they'll use phrases like, in old money, this would have been Asperger's syndrome when they're describing. So it's still alive and being used within our communities. But These two individuals worked in a mental institute, as was in Vienna in the war, in the Second World War. And their patients were children. Their patients were there because of stigma, because they were considered deficit, broken, unable, disabled, you could say. They were there because of their parents would send them there, and also because their parents were told to send their children there. They were essentially observed, and there were various papers created off the back of that. And Hans Asperger stayed in Vienna, and Leo Kanner went to America, where he carried on his studies. And there, at one stage, there was an official diagnosis of classic Kanner's autism as well. So Lorna Wing, who is the National Autistic Society founder, translated Hans Asperger's work in the 1980s into English, and was hence the term Asperger's syndrome. But I use this because of the reasons why we were sending our children away, or being told to send our children away, because of this brokenness. And then we jump forward to 1987, and this is Lovas, and Lovas again was a practitioner, a psychiatrist practitioner, and he talked about autism being a serious psychological disorder with an onset in early childhood. And within that context of this report in 1987, he observed these individuals and talks about behaviour modification treatment. He went on to create something called ABA, which you can look at upon the internet, is quite controversial in how it's perceived by both the neurotypical and the neurodivergent community. But certainly this whole kind of, I showed this slide because this is about us not sending our children away necessarily. These children were being observed in their homes and as part of a study, but there's still this negative dialect. There's still this deficit approach to children and to autism, and it's very much about what people can't do and how they aren't like us, how they aren't like, you know, the 83%. They aren't like a typically developing person's brain. Therefore, we have to modify their behavior in order for them to be like us, because anything else is broken and deficit. And that's very much the argument. And then we look at sort of today's description of autism. So it's kind of hard to get a rounded description of autism, but this was taken, if you Google it, that's kind of what pops up. And it's I was saying that again, autism is a lifelong developmental disability that affects how a person communicates with, relates to other people, and how they experience the world around them. Now, I've got a lot of autistic friends, and a lot of those individuals will say, do you know what, I'm not disabled. I'm not disabled by my condition. Actually, if you put me on an island, you don't surround me with people and all these challenges, I'm not disabled in what I can do. Then I have other autistic friends that will say, I am disabled by my condition. So it can be confusing, and it's really up to the individual whether or not they see their condition as being disabling or not. We were lucky enough to be part of the BBC's World Accessibility Day last year. And they came up with this great phrase and equation. So for all those mathematicians out there, you'll like this one. And it's really about whether or not somebody can access a certain task in a certain environment. And that dictates the level of disability that that person has. And you could apply that to anybody, couldn't you? So for example, it may well be that you can concentrate in a quiet office on writing a report, but you put you in the middle of a nightclub with strange smells, sounds, flashing lights, people interrupting you. Actually, you wouldn't be able to do that to the quality that it deserved. So we use that within our workplace assessments, and for us, we've called it the TED model. The task and environment equals the level of disability. So yes, so that would be your description of autism. Now, these people, apart from the bottom right, who is Alan Turing, are all diagnosed as being autistic. You'll see there Anthony Hopkins. He was diagnosed in his 70s. And when asked whether or not his autism diagnosis had benefited in his acting career, he said, yes, it has. If you look at Chris Packerman, I was lucky enough to actually present and be on a panel with Chris in March before all lockdown happened. truly brilliant individual, absolutely making the most of his neurological makeup, his preoccupation, as we like to call it. We neurotypical people and is sometimes call it an obsession, or an unhealthy interest. Well, do you know what? He's gone on, as has Dan Aykroyd on the right hand side there, to make a lot of money and a success of their lives due to that preoccupation, due to that obsession. So actually, is it this negative element of their behaviours that we originally thought it was? Well, definitely not. And then we've got Daryl Hannah as well, and I put her in there because there's very much this impression, and in fact there has been certain studies into, you know, the prevalence of diagnostics and characteristics of those of women and girls versus boys and men. And certainly I think it's fair to say that we have more boys and men diagnosed or identifying with characteristics than we do have girls and women, and it is a lot harder for girls and women. It's getting better to be able to get that diagnostic and that understanding of the insides of their heads. Alan Turing, down bottom right, he's a little bit of a hero of mine and hopefully everybody else in the British Isles, in that he helped to break the codes coming out of Germany in the Second World War by building a machine, the Enigma, and it's estimated that he saved over 4 million lives and reduced the war by 2 years. And he very much talks, if you look at his quotes and the things that he wrote about different thinkers, a very moving, very passionate individual, but definitely and clearly thought differently to others. And this is our interpretation of the spiky profile. Now, this is again another way of you illustrating what on earth this means, to kind of put it into some kind of context. And if you see down the middle of this slide, you'll see the dotted line. So let's pretend that the perfect person, it might even be you, was measured, okay, in terms of their psychology, the makeup of their brain, and they were measured, and that perfect person was assessed, and that was them. And you'll see the green line, and the green line is probably more your typical person. So good at some things and then maybe not so great at others. And they kind of bounce around within an accepted boundary of being good at some things and maybe less good at others. So somebody who is neurodivergent, ADHD or autistic or dyslexic, they might have a spikier profile. And again, this you'll notice there's no numbers at the sides or anything. It's purely a diagram to kind of put these things into context. So what they might have is stuff that they're quite good at. They're not just quite good at, they're quite exceptional at. And then they might have things that are quite severe challenges within their working environment. And I'm taking working as an example here. So let's take pretend like we're all 3-year-olds again. Let's pretend that this is somebody who is very good at detail. Maybe they're autistic and they're incredibly good at seeing detail. They're also really good at recognizing different patterns and analyzing information. And what they're also very good is retaining these facts and figures and being able to come up with innovative and new ways of looking at problems that perhaps we haven't even been able to consider before. But what they might have is challenges in a certain type of communication. So actually what they might be better at is emails or text or WhatsApp rather than verbal communication. You might be able to get the best out of them using different ways. And everybody's different. And all of this comes with this huge caveat that not to create these certain silos, that ADHD individuals are like this and autistic individuals are like that and dyslexia individuals are like that. What we really need to do is understand that it's so much more messier and interconnected than that, and start appreciating all of these skills and challenges, starting with the individuals and kind of building out. We might find challenges, and the last three are directly relating to that, with executive functioning, and we're going to come on to talk about some of those challenges in the latter part of this talk. This is the still tool. This is a gift from me to you. This is something that we talk about in relation to somebody's success. Imagine success being balanced on the top there. This still tool is very much about support from family and friends, self-awareness and those reasonable adjustments, and applying those three in those those areas, and actually that's when we really see that person thrive and being able to make the most out of the top of that spiky profile. Okay, so I think that was a quick skirt through, Rose.
It was really insightful. Learned a lot from that. So thank you very much. And obviously we wanted to kind of have a bit more of a discussion about kind of COVID-19 and how that affects you know, kind of neurodivergent people at the moment. So can we start to talk about the impact of COVID-19 and what should we be talking about with relation to environment specifically?
Okay. Funny you should say that. I have a slide all fully prepared. Okay, it almost sounds like we know what we're doing here, Rose, doesn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so if has the guidance gone out to the attendees yet,
yeah,
Rose?
Yeah,
it has. Okay, so we put together. At first we didn't actually we didn't put anything out originally to sort of help businesses because we wanted to kind of see how it pans out. The guide that you see has been really warmly received around the world actually now in relation to COVID-19 and empowering neurodiversity through these challenging times. And certainly one of the elements of this guide is environment. And I can't emphasize to you enough. In fact, the interesting thing is now is that we're getting neurotypical people coming to us and saying, now I know what you mean about environments because I can't concentrate at home. I've got the kids running around, I've got the smells from the kitchen, I've got my wife knocking on the door of the study, I've got the doorbell ringing because we're having to deliver everything to our house, and actually this environment is not suiting me. And actually it's that awareness now that we're seeing within the neurotypical community that are saying, do you know what, we get this a little bit more than we used to do, and actually how debilitating, and I'll come back to that, the TED model, how debilitating those environments can be on the quality of work that I can produce, which is great because this is something that actually there has been met with a certain amount of disbelief in the past. So within the guide, we've tried to have this from a really practical guide. So it's about little things like being decluttering, and this can be one of those things that you take away. Absolutely try to declutter the amount of information that your brain takes in. Try to reduce that as much as you can, and that the sensory input into your brain, because that will help you to feel less tired and be able to produce better work, or hopefully. So it's little things like controlling the level of volume in the office. It may well be that, you know, having a radio on helps you to drown out the kids screaming in the next room with mum or dad or whoever. But also it's about decluttering. So it's about reducing the amount of things that your brain has to process when you look at them. So actually it's about taking things off the walls, maybe, you know, reducing the amount of piled up papers, maybe taking what you need to see and just making sure that the laptop and one task is on your desk. So I could go on and on about environments, but I realise we've got other stuff to do. But it is how your environment can be the difference between you being able to produce a decent piece of work and you not. And there's sort of like a ticky box, and there's loads of checklists and top tips in the guide for you to take your employees and yourselves through some environmental best practice.
Oh, thank you. So with that, what about managing neurodiverse employees? I know we've got a few people here from kind of HR and recruitment teams. So how should we be managing neurodivergent teams?
Yeah, so again, referring back to the pack, because there's some really good best practice in here. But one of the case studies is my office manager, who is autistic, ADHD and dyslexic, and she really gives some great tips in her top tips document about, and I'll go through some of them now. So it's about giving facts and some solid evidence, black and white. What does the law say, the guidelines, the policies? So being able to give enough information, but not so much information that she feels overwhelmed. Keep your employees, or those that you're talking, and this can relate directly to children as well. Keep them up to date, but don't overwhelm them with information, because You might only want them to give them one sentence about a particular piece of work, but actually you just giving them that one sentence won't be enough, so they'll want to clarify it and understand it. So actually, what was there a point in giving them that piece of information in the first place? So be very clever about the amount of information that you're giving to those employees, and agree with them actually what would make them help them to feel better in terms of instructions, communicating, when to communicate, their working practices. Reasonable adjustments all still apply even though they're working from home. Okay, so ensure that you are talking to them about those reasonable adjustments, and that you've even considered them. I had somebody say the other day, who's an autistic solicitor, and he said just the fact that somebody is even just saying, do you know what, and I'm considering you, like I'm considering some of those challenges that you have. Is there anything that I can do to support you? Because I know in workplace we did this, but actually at home, how can we do that? So it may well be that actually they're having a ball. So I know some people that are autistic and have said, I was built for social isolation. This is brilliant. I'm going to produce the best work I've ever done, because actually this is great. So there's the other side of the coin, and actually what you might see is people really being innovative and being able to produce some really great work. Don't take it personally, and this is something that we've had some big discussions around just recently. Don't take it personally if people appear blunt on emails. The written word can be really misinterpreted, and making sure that people are taking breaks. I could go on again, but have a little look at Steph's case study in there. She comes up with some brilliant tips.
Fantastic, thank you so much. So another big thing that's come from this as well is obviously managing workload without that kind of, work environment, so to speak. So what advice would you give around, managing your workload from home?
Sure, okay, so we know that people in neurodivergent can have challenges in relation to managing their workload. We call this executive functioning, being able to prioritise, plan, organise, have an appreciation of time and deadlines. And sometimes they can be exceptional at it because they've actually found it quite challenging, and they've become super good at it as well. So it's not to say that everybody who's neurodivergent does have these challenges, but we quite often see it. It is about providing some structure and working with that individual within this temporary time. And I'll say temporary, but actually we don't know what the long-term effects of our working conditions are going to be out of this. But it is about having some flexibility in relation to managers, particularly about time management, about how you give instructions and how you help people to prioritise their workloads, how you can make sure that you're helping them to manage their workloads so they don't feel totally overwhelmed by those workloads, and how you can help them to plan going forward. And that's really difficult because we don't know how long this is going to go on for. We don't know what the future is going to look like, and it's that ambiguity and that uncertainty that's causing one of the major pieces of anxiety within the neurodivergent community at the moment. It is for everybody, but if I could explain it as being almost like an extreme version of what normally typically developing people, if I'm allowed to use that terminology, are experiencing, in that the lack of solid things to be able to grasp hold on is really causing a lot of anxiety, and that should feed directly into your well-being initiatives as well within your organisations.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for obviously sharing so much there that I think we can all learn from and utilise going forward. I've just had a quick look. I think we've got a bit of a quiet audience today, so we've not got any questions in there. So, but I'll pop you a quick question just to finish off, which I think will be a really nice kind of finisher, and hopefully get some get some kind of answers for everyone who's attended. What would be kind of the one key piece of advice for someone who is maybe sat at home, maybe struggling, and they don't know where to turn? I mean, who would you kind of recommend them to get in touch with, and what would you say the first step to getting help if you are struggling from that step?
Right. Okay. So first of all, it comes back to the stool tool in a way, doesn't it? It comes back to what your support network looks like, and everybody is very, very different. What I would say is to try as much as we can to normalise what somebody is feeling in terms of their anxiety, and that I've had it banded around you, we're all in this together and not alone, but actually there's a lot of people in neurodivergent that have said nothing's changed for them, but I still feel alone and I still feel like I am on my own. So I suppose it's about reaching out to the neurodivergent community and saying, do you know what, we're here for you. As a line manager, I am here for you. I don't want you to feel that. Is there anything I can do? And to start those lines of communication, agree those lines of communication and stick to it as much as you can. I'd like to finish with this, as I love this. This is Alan Turing as well. So he says, and hopefully out of the back of this we'll see some real amazing ideas and some people really thriving off the back of this change. But he says that it's sometimes the people who no one imagines anything of who do the things that no one imagined. And I think that now in this time and space, looking at COVID-19 and the challenges that it's come up with for us, there's no better time to make the most of those people who are neurodivergent.
Perfect. And thank you so much. And thanks for everyone for attending and for all your wise words there, Caroline. So yeah, we are hoping to maybe continue some more virtual events. So we'll keep in touch on our LinkedIn page and we'll be sharing some details hopefully very soon. But thank you so much. And yeah, we'll see you all soon.
Brilliant. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.